Hey everyone. Today I want to talk about a favorite game of mine from the NES, Bionic Commando. Back 30 years ago in Christmas of 1989, we got two games at our house. The first was Blaster Master. That's a game that I was never really any good at, and whether I cover it in the future, we'll see. But Bionic Commando was definitely a favorite. It was one I gravitated back to over and over, played multiple times, got to where I could beat it fairly easily, even to the point of not losing a life at one point. And I'll say I was a lucky kid in those days. My brothers worked at the local video store. They could bring home games that weren't rented at night or on the weekends, and that gave me a chance to play a whole lot of different games. But for that next year or so, Bionic Commando was one that I kept coming back to. I really enjoyed. So before we get started, let me point out Bionic Commando started in the arcades as an action platformer with very different levels from what we saw in the NES. Also in Japan, to point out, it was a different name. It was called Hitler's Resurrection Top Secret. But when localized to the US, of course, in those days, a lot of times potentially offensive material would be cleaned out. And most of it was, as we'll see later, maybe not everything was taken out, but pretty much any references of Nazis were taken out, and Germany at that point. Now, the arcade version has different levels than the NES. You can find ports of it. They were on, I believe, the C64. The best version is on the Amiga. But whenever it was brought to the NES, the developers decided to basically rebuild from the ground up. There was some new mechanics added. The story is pretty much the same, and the story was a spin-off. It was a spin-off from another Capcom game called Commando, which I'm sure many people have heard of. But the main gameplay trope was from an old game called Rock and Rope that they borrowed, another arcade game. And in those days, that was an interesting mixing, but it made for a really fun game. And in my opinion, the NES version became a more fun version, just because of what they did with the rebuild. So let's take a look at Bionic Commando, and I will see you back here at the end. The story of Bionic Commando takes place in an alternate timeline in the 1980s. War rages between the Empire, a successor to the Bads, or the Nazis of the Japanese version, and the Republic, are good guys and basically the USA of the story. In Japan, Nintendo was less worried about content, and it shows, as the Japanese version has Nazi symbolism prevalent throughout the game, including swastikas in place of the eagle symbol used in the American version. In the US, they were always concerned with potentially offensive material, so often we got a cleaned version of games made overseas. In our opening, the Republic sends the hero, Super Joe, who was also hero of the aforementioned Commando game, to infiltrate the Empire stronghold and stop the plot to build Project Albatross, an invincible flying fortress planned by the Bads, but thought lost at the end of the Great War. Now the plans have been found by Imperial leader Generalissimo Kilt, and he is building an Albatross for himself and the Imperial Army. Unfortunately, Super Joe is captured while trying to fulfill his mission to stop them. That's when you are sent in. A Republic captain with a bionic arm that allows you to grab from a distance and swing through each level to reach your goals. It's your job to rescue Super Joe and finish the mission to stop Project Albatross. Bionic Commando is basically an action platformer and shooter with a twist in game mechanics that makes it different from games with similar themes. You can't jump. The player must navigate the levels with their extending arm, which lets them climb and swing from place to place. Sometimes this means getting creative with your swings to figure out how to get to where you need to be. Learning the physics of the game and mastering the timing of the arm is essential to winning. And once you really have it down, you may figure out a trick or two that the developers didn't intend to happen, but will help you speed along. The game is structured by an overworld map where you move your chopper from area to area with the transfer command and enter each level with descend. Wide areas are mission areas where you must defeat a boss and destroy a power core to obtain an item or weapon that will help you along the way. Items you find are as important as weapons in this game, and the right choice will save your life often. During these missions, you will also find communication rooms where you will get story information. Sometimes this is affected by what communicator of various color you bring with you. Red areas are non-combat zones where you will gather other items and talk to characters furthering the story in their own way. If you fire your weapon in these zones, you will be fired upon, but sometimes it's worth the risk. The bosses you encounter in mission areas vary, but are all repeated throughout the game, each time with a new wrinkle to make them somewhat more difficult. But they don't always have to be defeated to beat the level. As long as you do enough damage to blow the core, you win. And a little tip, the rocket launcher always works with just 3 hits. Occasionally, though, you'll be forced to use a different weapon. Late in the game, a few details come to light. Upon rescuing Super Joe, you learn Project Albatross can't function without the leader of the Bads to run it. So the Empire is also resurrecting Master D to complete their plan. Super Joe asks you to fight with him and you must finish his mission. And here comes one of my favorite game endings of all time. In the game's final level, you find that Generalissimo Kilt has just pulled the plug on Master D's resurrection. The Empire has miraculously managed to power up the Albatross, and they don't need him now. But just as he finishes monologuing, electricity spews from Master D's tank and murders the Generalissimo. Then Master D emerges alive and well. And yeah, it's pretty obvious who he really is. With all the censorship, it still amazes me Nintendo didn't require Capcom to change the character art. After Master D claims he'll take control of Albatross and then take over the world, you are shoved right into a fight with Project Albatross itself, a mobile weapon platform like none before. Next, after defeating Albatross, the end is near. You travel forward and are shortly handed the Hyper Bazooka by a Republic soldier and are forced to leap over a ledge where you must fire a single shot into a helicopter cockpit and put an end to Master D in what may be one of the most graphic scenes in NES history. From there, it's a race from the exploding base and a last fight with a returning boss to see our heroes fly off into the sunset in victory. Now, there's more to the ending than that, but hopefully this encourages people to play the game themselves and see what happens. Now, like I said, 30 years ago, I powered up this game and I've had a blast with it ever since. I always have great memories with it. I hope you guys give it a shot. And if you do, go ahead in the comments, let me know what you think of it. If you've played the game in the past and you want to share your memories, go ahead and leave them in the comments. And while you're there, leave a like, go ahead and subscribe, and that way you'll be able to watch videos whenever they come along in the future. With that, I'm S0lman Grundy, and until next time, have some fun, play a game. Thanks.